Hello and welcome once again to Railway Mania. This is a very special video for me as it's the announcement of our first locomotive body kit, the Avonside B4 060 saddle tank. This kit's been designed by Adam White and we are representing 3 different locomotives in the initial release. The first of these is very close to my heart because it's Portbury from the Bristol Harbour Railway. The second is Edwin Hulse, aka Imperial Smelting Corporation No. 2 from the Avon Valley Railway, and the third one is the more generic NCB Ironstone Industry locomotive. These all have the distinctive round tanks. A later release will include the more angled square tank versions. A portion of the profits from the sale of the Portbury and Edwin Hulse kits will go towards the restoration and upkeep of the real locomotives, so you'll not only get a cool locomotive body kit, you will also be helping to support railway preservation. Now in this video I'm going to be building a test model of Edwin Hulse to show you how the basic kit goes together. If you're interested in buying the kit, there will be a link in the description. Now you will need a Peckett B2 chassis from Hornby to make this, which I think is quite poetic because Avonside and Peckett were 2 big rivals in Bristol. Let's get on with it. The kit comes in 3 main components, the saddle tank and boiler, the running plate and the cab. Now the running plate might appear quite bendy at first, but when it all gets bolted together it straightens out really nicely. Use some flush cutters or snips to take the accessories off the accessory float. Just like cleaning flash off a resin kit, you need to remove the supports using a sharp knife and some sandpaper and files. These supports are left over from the 3D printing process. Removing the support material will enable a nice flush fit between components and smooth surfaces for painting. The fireman's side of the running board is printed a little bit thicker because that's where the supports go. What you'll need to do is cut those off and file them down nice and smooth. One important thing to remember about 3D printed resin is that it's very brittle. It will flex a tiny bit, but then all of a sudden it can end up snapping on you, so you do need to be careful when handling the components. This is just a quick demonstration to show where the firebox backhead goes into the locomotive boiler. What I like to kick things off with is a nice coat of filler primer because this starts to fill in the little ridges that are caused by the 3D printing process, and it allows for effective wet sanding. Try and use a fresh blade of the knife when removing the support material. One of the reasons I use filler primer is because it's great for wet sanding. This is using fine wet and dry sandpaper, used wet, which allows it to glide over the surfaces and create a nice smooth area for painting. It also helps prevent the sandpaper getting clogged with paint dust. Mainly I'm sanding the top surfaces of the running board. The bottom gets a little bit of sanding, but not that much because it's not going to be visible when mounted on the model. It's useful to fold the sandpaper in half and use the sharp edge to get into the little nooks and crannies without removing the rivet detail. One of the reasons that Adam split the kit into separate parts was to make it easier to sand. 3D printing is great for retaining detail, but the surface ends up with lots of little ridges as the print is done in layers. These ridges need to be filled and sanded to create a realistic smooth surface. On the cab front, I'm experimenting with using a wire brush pen. I'm using a light touch here because I only want to take off the paint that's on the high points of the ridges, leaving the paint in the dips. The sanding process is tedious, but it is the most important one to get a nice finish from a 3D printed kit. Moving on to something a little bit more interesting are the accessories. The safety valve comes in a separately fitted component to be fitted into the top of the safety valve cover and dome. You must always make sure that the safety valve is aligned with the slot on the bottom of the dome to enable it to sit lengthways down the boiler. Each version of the kit comes with different accessories. Portbury comes with Peckett buffers because that's what it was fitted with in later life, whereas Edwin Hulse comes with the distinctive cast chimney cap, as well as the cab having the extended bunker. Whilst we wait for the coat of primer on the accessories to dry, it's time to move on to the cab. I'm using a pin vice drill to open up the handrail holes. These holes are actually in the resin already, but can sometimes become clogged with uncured resin. Drilling them like this ensures that they are the correct size for the handrails. Where the handrails mount to the body, they should be a 0.45mm hole, whereas for handrail knobs it needs to be between 0.8 and 1mm. The kit is supplied with enough handrail wire and handrail knobs to do the entire locomotive. drop of superglue on the back of the handrail knobs ensures they are held into place. From my experience of working with Portbury, the tank filler lid is made of wood, so I'll be painting this one in burnt umber. Kicking off the colour coats with some black, for the running board, cab roof and boiler, I'm going to add a splash of colour now with the red buffer beams. Whilst I'm painting the red, I'll also paint the regulator handle. The firebox backhead can be painted separately before fitting. I managed to make a little bit of a mistake and broke my regulator handle, but no matter, I've turned it upside down to use as a single-ended one. On this model, I've omitted adding the front handrails and smokebox details until last because I want to keep the smokebox nice and flat to make it easy to mask off for the colour coat. The paint I'm using is a generic aerosol from eBay. Apparently this is used for wheelbarrows, so let's see how it does on the locomotive. I found this quite slow to dry compared to the normal Halfords paints. The front handrail wire is bent around a pen before having the handrail knobs threaded on. using rocket card glue wherever possible because I want to be able to make sure that I can still pull the model apart if needed, without causing major damage. For this test I'm using a cast smokebox door dart, but the real ones are supplied with a brass one. The sandboxes are separately fitted. It's best to use a photograph to judge where these should be. For the cab interior I'm using mainly acrylic paint because it's fast drying and has good coverage. It's important to paint the cab interior before gluing it to the running board. The coupling hooks need the end of the shanks trimming down to fit inside the slot. The only accessory not included in the kit is the whistle. This is because there are so many different variants of whistle we thought it best left to the end user. What I'm using here is an old Triang Hornby brass one from eBay. With the acrylic paint dry, the gauges and the steam manifold inside the cab can be painted up. The body is mounted using two 10BA nuts and bolts. It's important to mount the first nut inside the running board before gluing the saddle tank on. This is because it is a captive nut and needs to be glued into place as it's very hard to access otherwise. The rear mounting bolt needs to be cut down to around 9mm to prevent it from poking through the cab floor. Now comes the exciting bit, the proper assembly of the model. It's important to do a dry run to make sure the pieces fit nice and flush. One of the final tasks for now is to fit the cab handrails. These vertical handrails slot through tiny holes in the running board. Again, we'll open these up with the pin vise drill before sliding the wire through, cutting it to size and gluing it into place. Then it can be painted and Bob's your uncle. This is where I'm going to leave this model now. It is a bit toy-like in a high gloss coat, but I'm awaiting some nice transfers for it to bring it to life. Then it can be weathered and dulled down a bit. The real thing led a very hard life in industry, so the weathering I imagine will be quite heavy. I really hope you enjoyed this build and it encourages you to buy one of our models. We're really proud of what we've done. I'm especially grateful to Adam for all his work in designing this model and putting up with all of my pedantic changes and requests. If you have any questions or queries, please pop them in the comments section below. As always, thanks so much for watching and hope to see you again soon.